Good morning. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Friday, February 14th, 2025. Happy Valentine's Day. It is just after 11 a.m. and we're continuing our romp through the FY26 budget, and we're delighted to have the Secretary of State's office with us. So, Madam Secretary and Madam Deputy Secretary, welcome. You've all met everybody here or not?
Yes,
Yes, you have. Okay.
I believe that I know.
I think you have. So great. So why don't you introduce yourselves and take it away for us?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I'm Sarah Copeland-Hansis, your Secretary of State. With me is our deputy.
I'm Lauren Hibbert. Nice to see you all.
And we have our two aces with us. Go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Welcome,
Yes.
all of you.
We have submitted for the committee our standard PowerPoint packet that will run you through all the divisions and activities of our agency. For testimony today, since we have 30 minutes, we will stick with the memo that tracks to the questions that the committee asked. And we're happy to come back or meet one-on-one if anyone has any follow-up questions. So the first question you asked is, are there changes regarding the delivery of service that are being considered in order to serve Vermonters more effectively? And I want to thank the committee for that question, because customer service is a very core focus of our agency. We recognize that increasingly your IT presence, your IT platform is the front door through which many customers come. So we are 3/4 of the way through upgrading some major IT projects in the Secretary of State's office. And those, you can see an outline of that on page 10 of the slide deck. These are coming in on time and on budget. And so far, customers are giving us rave reviews about the new platforms as we roll them out. The fourth and final platform being the Vermont Election Management System. That is the most complex and most consequential, I think, of the new IT platforms, and that will roll out shortly after clerks have finished using them for this year's town meeting and school budget votes. Use of space in fiscal 24, we've really focused on how much space do we need. We have done a review of how many of our employees prefer to work in a hybrid fashion, some days at home, some days in the office. And with that knowledge and embracing the hybrid work mode, we've been able to reduce our footprint, particularly at OPR, which brought about $50,000 a year savings. And we feel pretty proud of that work, and it is helping us to use our space much more efficiently. We're also initiating some positive reporting so that we can make sure that we are appropriately allocating overhead to the various professions within our Office of Professional Regulation.
The next question is, what new initiatives are you proposing in your budget? Some of them are in the budget that we prepared for the administration and that you have in front of you. Some are outside of that budget preparation, either because we obtained more clarity about what we needed after we submitted the budget, or they are dependent on the passage of bills that are pending in this building. So I'm going to talk about both. The ones that are in the budget as prepared before you is a paralegal for our municipal services program. This is a service that our office provides for the public. And primarily, the clerks have an association, the cities and towns have an association. Vermonters do not have an association outside of this building. So we answer a lot of questions about open meeting law, public meetings, municipal law, basically about dog licenses, cemeteries. And as the law has gotten more confusing or more updated post COVID, particularly open meeting law, the nature of our inquiries has really grown and the complexity has grown. Additionally, with the open meeting law, we are responsible for providing training, and we're being asked to provide training even in places where we're not required to. So a paralegal would help streamline our process, help us create data about and track data about what types of questions were being asked and help us deliver services in a more effective way. The other piece is the VAN grant. This is something that was in our budget last year, but we wanted obviously to include it and to talk about it this year as well. They are asking for an increase in the grant. Last year it was $1 million. This year it's 1.35. The Secretary of State supports that. As you folks know, the way that public access television has been supported has been through fees in our cable bills, but our people are not using cable. And so the revenue to public access has really decreased. And this grant, which used to be with Public Service, then came to the Secretary of State. We think it should remain within the Secretary of State, really helps public access television sustain itself. And they need to move either through increasing this grant periodically over the years, but also into an alternate revenue source besides cable fees. So this increase will help them sustain their level of service that they provide now under the grant that they received last year. And we think it's a great fit for the Secretary of State's office because public access television is a way that we do democracy. And so it's great for us. Madam Chair, do you want?
Do you, are you essentially, thank you, Madam Chair, are you essentially working as the equivalent of like a fiscal agent for the network? Do you put any kind of restrictions on how they use the money or suggest things that they need to not advertise, but just to put across that A, makes it clear that this is public money, or B, that, you know, sometimes back in the old days, there's, you know, broadcast television had a requirement to show public interest shows. Do you put any of that on, any restrictions or rules on that money?
We have not. It has not been part of the authority given to us by the legislature. So we act more as a financial agent or pass through for the grant monies at this time.
And it's in line with their mission of covering municipal issues and local events. And so, you know, we haven't seen an issue with the way they allocate their time.
In that area though, what are we doing to change to avoid duplication where, you know, meetings and events are live streamed? I mean, for example, yesterday we had a public hearing that's live streamed, right? And we have it on YouTube, and yet we're being recorded by Community Access TV I mean, it just seems like, is it really necessary? I mean, maybe it needs to be linked into their cable access stations through our YouTube link, but do we need a person here with a camera to record an event that's already being live streamed?
Well, you know, when there's a person behind the camera, they can do a better job of highlighting the individuals who are speaking. And then as far as the technology of what they can pull off of your YouTube that comes from a camera at the center of the table versus a camera with a human being behind it.
Listen, I fully support the community acts. They play a very, very important role. And I'm pleased that, you know, it's got now has a home as to funding. It's just the world has changed and we've got to be cognizant of maybe changing with it so that we're not duplicating a lot of things. A lot more things are automated now.
Representative Dickinson.
Yeah, on that same note, this is a long time ago. When I was on the institutions committee, we had discussions of getting rid of Vermont Interactive TV. I'm sure you remember that. And there was a lot of push and pull on that. Although we were spending, I don't know, $1 million per site or something. And I think that sort of fits into the same thing that the representative mentions, is that the changes of how we do things has galloped along, you know, faster every year. we have other things, other places recording what we're doing here that are, I don't even know if anybody, how we pay for them. I think we can just access it. So there's lots of other things that are going on. And the other thing that I have a question on that relates to this is that the economics of your budget, you know, now you're taking on Van because the cable networks are declining. The amount of usage of that is declining. And so that source of private money to support this public good is now declining. And now we're having to put state money into it.
Yes.
And I think last time you were here, you also talked about the fact that we were doing all these compacts. And so we are losing money into our OPR budget, that the fees, you don't get the licensure fees. So that's having an impact on your budget that we're going to have to put in. And that's happened in other couple of other instances in the state. I mean, you're not alone, but
Yeah.
how does that work for you guys?
So I'm going to let the secretary talk about the OPR fund for the next question, but I think for public access television, you know, we are pursuing this grant with them. They are as well. And then they're working with several legislators about finding how a sustainable source or replacement of those cable fees. And there's a couple of different ideas proposed. And, you know, that's really their subject area and their expertise. But what I will say is that we're very happy to administer this grant. And we do think that that public access television is a really key part of democracy. The technological pieces of dual streaming, you'd have to ask them about because we don't know. But I do think that this is valuable and worth public funds to sustain.
Thank you.
This is just a pass-through grant, right?
It is.
So generally, with a pass-through grant, the agency don't have much say in the, you know, the building of, or the rationale behind the work that's going to be done through that grant. So do you have any hook on that at all, or is this just?
Currently, the way this grant has been drafted, no. And also I'll just note that the way this grant has been drafted, we don't receive any money from this grant to administer it. So if that were to have more hooks or more decision points, we would probably argue that we would keep a little bit of that fund to do that work. But currently this is a pass-through grant.
So the only thing this has to do with your budget, your own budget, is the amount of time you have to spend administering the grant.
Which at this point is de minimis.
Just an observation of Vermont Interactive Television was kind of hard to believe that it's kind of an old school Zoom. It was a government program in locations around the state where people could come in and have meetings.
Yeah.
I used it.
And it was a shock to lose it only because nobody realized that the technology was growing to allow for what makes this different to me than Zoom, even in the case of meetings here, is that the cable access with the smaller cameras and the ability to go as many places as they can with as few staff as they have is almost a replacement for VIT. I mean, that was kind of what came down the pike afterwards. So I don't think it, and now we're seeing a cable is going out, their fees are just, you know, we don't have an easy way of having the equivalent of that money coming back in. And so I totally support the notion of it being a pass through. If it ends up finding a different home, fine. But given the fact that most public access programs are related to local meetings, I think does fit what your mission is in terms of civics and in terms of giving people an opportunity to have just to be included. So I believe for you guys for taking it on. I think this is the nature of where we are now.
It's Vermont Interactive TV almost feels like it was ahead of its time. It's like we didn't know really how to use. I remember using it and thinking, this is so weird, you know, and nowadays we don't think of it, but I think for the time it was, we weren't thinking that way.
Well, to get to the conversation about the automobiles, you know, to not have to drive across
Yeah.
the state, from Newport to Bennington, go to a meeting.
Exactly.
Now we have Teams or Zoom or whatever.
Right.
But that's exactly what it was for.
Right, exactly.
I just want to amplify the piece about the local access. Because there was a time when if anybody showed up at a select board meeting, it was sort of a big deal. And recently I was at a select board meeting. There were 10 people there. There were 20 people online. And this is good for democracy. This is good for shining light and letting people participate. So I think that local level is where this really does show up.
So
Okay.
if I may,
Yes.
additional budget needs that weren't in our original proposal. The biggest is the voter guide. We would like to provide a voter guide, one per household for Vermont registered voters that is ballot specific and provides information about the candidates that are on their ballot. Vermont was one of the first, was the first state on this side of the Mississippi to provide a voter guide. This last election, we did it digitally, but as we all know, there are access issues with the digital guide, and also people have to know to look for it. So we would like to mail everybody a voter guide, one per household with the candidates that are on that household's ballot. And we think that this will provide voters to make informed decisions and hopefully encourage more voters to vote in every election item on their ballot.
Was this for general elections?
It would be for general elections.
So it wouldn't be for this year because there's no general.
That's right. But it would be good for us to receive this money this year so that we can start preparing. This will take a level of effort, which will go through the we'll really need to start at the very the last quarter of fiscal year 26. There is a bill moving about licensure of doulas like we've done in the past. We are asking for money to stand up that profession. And as we have in the past, that is about $25,000 for us to do between the IT changes, rulemaking, and outreach. And mental health executive officer, we would like to add this position to our team. We did a regulatory review of all of the mental health professions. For the last 2 years, we filed it in December. It's really great work if anyone is interested in looking at it. But one of the core recommendations is that we need to consolidate our mental health professions into one board, streamline our pathways into licensure, create more flexibility. And this will mean a complete rewrite of the statutes around these professions, the rules around these professions, and require significant stakeholder engagement. We really need a person to help us do that. And so that's why we're asking for a mental health executive officer.
Is this a limited service position?
We see it as an ongoing position because of in terms of licensee populations, mental health at the Office of Professional Regulation is our fourth largest profession, or depending on how you count it, our third or our fourth largest profession. We need this position on an ongoing basis.
Rep. Lewis, did you have a question?
So the service providers, the network of service providers around, would this mean that you would have more standards for those, and would you be able to license those? Well, would this tighten anything up in terms of consistency and services being provided around the state by those folks?
So I want to be careful that I understand what you're asking me. Are you asking me about the designated agencies? We do not monitor or regulate the designated agencies. What the Office of Professional Regulation does is regulate the individuals who work within the designated agencies or who work outside of the designated agencies. So we do think that this will help increase the number of mental health providers in our state, because right now the statutes are sometimes outdated, and also the statutes and rules do not provide a lot of creativity or discretion. And we think if we had someone as the executive officer in mental health, we'd be able to provide more of customized review of people's applications and get more people licensed.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. So you have a series of mental health professions that you're regulating and that you're licensing and that are,
Yes.
and I would assume, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you have people that are managing those right now. And a team of people who do lawyers and people who do the work when an issue that comes up. What are you going to do if you put them all together, which is actually maybe a really good idea, consolidating it? I mean, that would make sense. But can you use those people, or how does that work if you're going?
Yes, that is a very fair question. Right now, we have one licensing specialist
Mhm.
who focuses on mental health. And I believe that she does a Herculean job managing the scope and breadth of the applications that come to her. There are ways that we can improve that process. Many of them wait for the board to review those applications, whereas if we had an executive officer, that executive officer could review applications and make determinations. And so we would be able to process applications significantly faster. We also need this position. We do have 3 attorneys, but they oversee 53 professions. So we don't have someone dedicated to mental health in any way. It's a very, OPR is lean and mean and, friendly.
Nice.
Mean in physical sense, yes. But we use our staff in multitudes of ways every day for many different professions. But mental health is one that takes a lot of our time, and we know that it's one of our professions where we are the slowest in responding because of the complicated questions that get asked and because of the complexity of the applications themselves. Mental health, you have to graduate in almost all of our programs. You have to graduate from a program, then you take an exam, and then you do supervised practice. So it actually is a very long pathway for good reason. But people who apply for a mental health license are with us for a duration of years before they get their final license. So it's of our pathways of occupational licensure in this state, it is our longest, and it's very complicated.
Okay, the second question I have on this is that normally OPR is paid for by the fees that are administered for the licenses, and that, the fee is not a tax, it's something that you,
Yes.
are you covering this with your fee, or are you trying to use general funds for this?
So we would love to be able to say that we have money to cover this position. We do not, because of the deficit that OPR is at. So we are asking for a general fund allocation. As your previous question had pointed out, this is a public good. We are asking for that. But our hope would be that in future years, the OPR fees would cover this position.
Yeah.
This would not be a continual ask, but for this year, that is our hope. That it would not be a continual ask, but for this year, we are asking.
Yeah, because that would normally be in the fee though.
Yes.
You would raise the fees to accommodate whatever the cost is.
Well, yes, but I'm gonna let the secretary to talk about what we're doing with the OPR money report. But yes.
We have another question before that represents me.
You had a question about the deficit, but I'm seeing that's in the next.
It is.
Question, so.
Okay. There is an initiative, we did a Sunrise report on early childhood educators, getting them licensed within our state. If that bill were to pass, we would need an executive officer and a staff attorney to start working on that program. Licensure would become operational within 2 years. So there would be an on-ramp of standing up a board. We're asking for a board for that profession, which is odd for OPR, but given the scope and breadth of the profession, we think a board is appropriate. And we'll need to do rulemaking before we can issue licenses. And this is a profession, again, where we will need to do significant outreach. So we need to pre-game our staffing for this profession before we collect a single dollar, which is why we are asking for a general fund allocation to support this work.
It's the 1.3.
So the 1.3 is a request from
Million, thousand?
it's a million. I should have put an M after it. I apologize. So that is a request from the community, the advocates for this. And they would very much like to have 2 cycles of license reimbursement for this profession. And I would let them speak to this, but they are asking that this could come out of the payroll tax related to childcare.
Where's your question? Or you're just
Yeah,
processing?
No, I'm processing whether or not, so how many early childhood educators are there today? Do you have any idea? And they'd all have to be licensed?
I sure do, but I don't have that number in front of me. I know that number, but I don't know it in a way that I can tell it to you right now.
Just wondering whether or not this is gonna crash our early childhood educators, whether or not all of them would actually be able to get through the program.
Yeah, we did a sunrise report, which is chapter 57, which does an analysis of whether there is a risk to the public that necessitates government intrusion into the space. We found that there was, and that the appropriate level of licensure was licensure. And we are recommending 3 different levels of licensure, depending on the scope of practice and the level of work that someone is doing. And there would be a 6-year period that we're calling a bridge license to get people to the point where they can meet the qualifications, but they would be licensed during that period. We understand the complexities of this space, and our goal is absolutely to make sure that everyone who's currently working as an early childhood educator who wants to get licensed is able to do so. And we're going to work with people. And that's really why we need this executive officer and staff attorney. This is a complicated field. We do not want to upset an apple cart by putting this in. And it's a layer of nuance and responsibility that OPR is taking on that we're very excited about, but we want to do appropriately.
I want to share, this is coming from the field. This isn't coming from this office. And this is part of an ongoing quality improvement. And I think we would be the first in the nation to start this. And part of both quality and the rationale for continuing to raise the wages up to a livable wage for people who work in this vital field.
Great. So the next question that the committee posed was, where do we see significant challenges? And so there are 2 areas that I'd like to talk about with respect to these challenges. One is in the elections realm, and the other is our Office of Professional Regulation. Given what we're hearing from DC, we do not expect to see a renewal of the Help America Vote Act grants. We use them to cover approximately 60% of our elections division. Without continued federal funding, we will need to come back to the legislature in future years to help us cover that 60% of the elections division that we have previously covered with those federal grants.
And how much do you get? How much is that a year in federal grants?
We would typically get $1 million a year, and we have a few grants where we have accumulated a balance and have some interest that we're spending down. But I'll remind the committee that we did just replace 3 of our elections IT systems, with which we needed to use a lot of that savings.
But usually it's $1 million grant.
The $200,000 match.
Yes.
Okay.
In addition, in the elections realm, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Administration, say that 10 times fast, has provided our office and town and city clerks across the state with significant resources and support in the cybersecurity realm and in terms of physical security assessments and trainings to our town and city clerks in order to maintain safe elections. We are unsure of the future of CISA at this moment. It is at this time unfathomable to us how we would be able to provide the level of security support to the state of Vermont and to our many town and city clerks who operate on a shoestring budget themselves in the absence of support from this federal agency. So we're working very closely with our congressional delegation and within the National Association of Secretaries of State to advocate for a resumption in this program, which right now appears to be on hold.
I'm going to pause this for just a second. I'm realizing that we're running late and we have somebody else that was going to be here at 11:30. And I always love hearing what you all have to say. Want to just figure out how much time so we can let the next people know. Can we be done by 11:45?
I think so.
Okay, that would be great.
I'll talk
Thank you
fast.
very much.
OPR is the next area of challenge. That's one that we have been well aware of for several years. We are in the process of doing a detailed study of where we spend our time and resources within the Office of Professional Regulation, because we recognize that the model of an individual licensee or group of licensees supporting all of the activities necessary to regulate that profession is no longer working for us. In part because of really good policy decisions that we've made in order to meet the needs of Vermonters, such as entering into interstate compacts. When we enter into an interstate compact, the license fee for that professional who is working in Vermont may be paid to a different state, but if they have a complaint against them while they're working in Vermont, we incur the cost of investigating and prosecuting that complaint. And so that is not the only factor that's contributing to OPR's budget crunch. We have submitted an interim money study. We're gathering a lot more data. And we hope to come back and engage with you all on solutions in the coming years. But certainly wanted to flag that as one of our areas of challenges.
Programs with significant financial changes. We've already talked about elections. That is a significant change. But also Safe at Home. We were given new groups that are qualified for Safe at Home in 2023. As soon as discussion started happening, and as soon as that bill passed, it became very clear that the old way that we would become in contact with folks was not going to work. And we looked at how the program had been operated. It was quite literally paper forms and an Excel spreadsheet. And we have decided to modernize that program. Again, this is an IT build, not a significantly expensive one, but we're very excited about it because we're going to be able to interact and do live messaging with our participants, not live, but back and forth system messaging. People are going to be able to update their address on their phone as opposed to having to find a form, print it out, and mail it to us. And given the population groups that this program serves, we think this is going to be a great asset to folks.
I think there was a question.
Yeah, I didn't quite get to my question here. So thanks for explaining why the deficit's there. What's the magnitude of the deficit?
It's just over $1 million right now. I think it's 1.2,
That's just
1.3.
year after year after year, it's running down.
I will say that it was more. So we've actually made an improvement on our deficit since last year's presentation, and we're very proud of that because we've been really being as thrifty as we can. We've been cutting back on our IT spend. Our staff have not been going to conferences unless they're paid for. I mean, we've been really, really, really thrifty. And I believe we're at about a 600,000 improvement from last year's.
So you have some kind of a target in mind, perhaps when you might be able to get rid of that?
Well, it's a little hard to predict that because
Compact stuff.
the impact of compacts tends to have a long tail. We don't know for sure the new compacts that we've entered and what their impact will be on the revenue coming in licensing fees.
Great, thanks.
Great. I am going to just run right through very quickly on the federal funding question because I have already covered much of that, of course, in the elections realm. We had been able to rely on federal funding that is appropriate because it is a state executing a federal election for congressional representatives and president and vice president. That funding is up in the air at the moment and remains to be seen. And then I realized in our budget memo that I have put in an acronym here that you couldn't possibly know I don't know. And so.
ESARA?
Yes. The VSARA is the Vermont State Archives and Records Administration, generally bringing in around $40,000 a year annually. We don't know an update on this grant. We certainly hope that it will continue to come. State archives and records are critical in a democracy. We need to maintain these records so that they are available for inspection to Vermonters and others who may want to keep an eye on what's happening. So that is very important. And then in the OPR realm, $320,000 a year for specific IT projects. They may or may not renew depending on the project's approval. So
GLP.
That is our IT system, next generation licensing platform at
Oh, thanks.
And then performance goals, we have many that are informal, but the most formal is reflected in that programmatic and performance measure budget report, which is part of the supplemental information to our budget.
Great. So, thank you. That's really helpful to have those answered. I'm just looking at your other presentation, which I think covered a lot of those, but I'm wondering if there's anything particular in the ups and downs. Is ban the only general fund in for that you need?
That is
This out quickly, sorry.
That is within the budget as proposed to you, yes. Van is the only general fund, the paralegal position, which is the other thing that is new, we can absorb in our budget. However, we do have these additional asks.
Right, and so how much is that total in general fund?
Great question.
1.5 for the voter guide, and then the remaining, doulas and early childhood educators will come to you as bills.
Yeah.
So it would be 1.5 for the
Plus the one
voter guide plus the mental health executive
Yes.
officer.
Okay.
I'm sorry, we should have outlined that more clearly to make it easier.
All right, that's helpful. That's great. Anything else you'd like to let us know in the next minute and a half?
Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any follow-up questions, any ponderings that we weren't able to get to. I'm sorry that we had to jog through this so quickly, but I know you all are very busy. So please follow up with us if you need anything.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. Thank your whole team for the work they do. We're in interesting times, and I know you're doing a lot with getting out and about, meeting businesses and folks, and talking about civics and democracy and
Absolutely.
the ability to vote and all those good things. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, we're going to go right into our next one, which is the Vermont Community Broadband Board. And thank you for your patience, everybody. And if you would like to introduce yourselves, or maybe we'll give us a second here to find the information.
Yeah, I'll start. I'm Christine Hulquist. I stubbornly use she, her pronouns. And I'm the executive director, but I'm going to turn this presentation over to Christina Sweet and JB Ledoux. Christine is there present with you since I couldn't make it to Montpelier. Of course, she's got better knowledge about the budget than I do anyhow. So, but
Great.
yeah, I'm
So
definitely here to answer higher level questions.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. And you have not been in this room yet this year, have you?
not.
So we have 6 new members from last year. So why don't we introduce ourselves and we'll fill in the gaps with the people that aren't sitting here at the moment.
Hi, I'm Dave Iacoboni, Morrisville, and I represent the Memorial Washington District. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. John Kosenska from Burke, and I represent the Essex Caledonian District.
Hey, Brian, nice to meet you.
Hi, Mike Nigro. I represent Bennington and Bella.
Great, thank you.
Tom Stevens from Waterbury, representing the Washington Chittenden District.
And Jim Harrison sits here. He's from Chittenden town, and he has I'll get it wrong. I think Mendon and Killington and Pittsfield or something. Anyway, I'm sure I'm doing it wrong, but that area, and I'm Robin Shy from Middlebury.
Tiff Bloomley from Burlington.
Trevor Squirrel in Underhill and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Berkshire, Highgate, Franklin, and Richford.
Mike Marwicki, who represents the trio of towns in the,
Putney and Dummerston.
and Lynn Dickinson, I represent St. Albans Town.
Very nice to meet you all. I'm Christina Sweet, and I'm the Director of Regulatory Compliance and Risk Management at the Vermont Community Broadband Board in the Department of Public Service.
Great, thank you.
I will get started with the program aspect of our presentation today, and then pass it off to my colleague JB Ledoux, who is our financial manager, and will really be able to speak more in depth about our budget. Since we don't have the presentation on the screen, I'm just going to open it on the phone.
And you can just tell us what page, we have copies of it.
Wonderful, thank you. And I mean, I think I know where we are in general. So the Vermont Community Broadband Board was established in Act 21. Perfect, thank you so much. Act 21 or Act 71 of 2021. And our mission is really to accelerate community broadband deployment across the state of Vermont with the goal of getting to 100% universal broadband access that is affordable to all Vermonters. And since I don't want to bury the lead, we're about 95% of the way there. So we are making really significant progress. It is very, very exciting. Now that final 5% is probably going to be some of the most challenging, but we're really close, which is great. And the Act 71 also established communications union districts in the state of Vermont, which are unions of towns and cities that have come together to actually deploy these community broadband solutions across Vermont, especially in areas where there has been a lack of commercial investment in getting broadband to Vermonters. So most of our work, and I'll skip ahead a little bit since I know we're short on time here, is funded by federal grants and the Universal Service Fund. We have two pots of funds through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. One is from the state and local fiscal recovery funds. We have obligated $150 million in those funds to fund broadband pre-construction grants. Those have gone to the community or communications unit districts or CUDs to actually help them build the capacity to undertake broadband construction projects. And the second purpose under those funds has been to fund broadband construction grants, which have deployed broadband projects throughout the state. We also have funding from Capital Projects Fund. We're one of two entities in the state of Vermont that has ARPA Capital Projects Fund dollars. The other is libraries. We have 95 million allocated to us in that grant, and we have obligated so far around 88 million in broadband construction grants.
At some point, we'll talk about worries with the federal government, but I'm glad that you've obligated 88 million of it. And I wonder if you worry about the other 7 million.
Yes, well, you know, what is nice about really all of the federal money that we have at this point is that it is in grant agreements. And so certainly we will talk a little bit about the federal climate and our concerns there, but we have grant agreements that are fully executed from the federal government for these funds. And I think, so far we've been very successful with the results of these broadband construction grants. And again, we're now at about 95% universal broadband coverage in the state of Vermont. One of our additional sources of funding is the Universal Service Fund, which is funded through a surcharge on telecommunications service. And this has really been a backbone source of funding for VCBB, which has allowed us to have some flexibility in funding where certain costs are unallowable under federal grants. And we've also used this really as funding for some of the core work of our staff, and in some cases as match for federal grants. Our next big pot of funds is from the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. This is a federal program under the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, which is housed under the Department of Commerce. And this is a federal program that was established in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021 to provide $42.45 billion nationally for broadband deployment. Vermont's slice of that pie is almost 229 million, and we do now have a grant agreement with that 229 million executed. We are going to be putting out most of that funding, about 214 million, in construction grants. Those will be available to any entity that can apply, that wants to apply to complete construction in Vermont. And we will be reviewing applications to that program later this year. So we hope to have decisions on who will receive those grants, whether they are communications union districts or other internet service providers, around by the end of the year.
So this is the BEAD program,
Yes,
right?
this is
And
the
this
BEAD
is one
program.
that I was reading could be at risk. And I
We
do
do
have a
have-
sign,
yes.
but that doesn't seem to matter right now.
I think we have a few concerns about this leadership. We don't know anything about leadership at the NTIA right now. I believe the Department of Commerce Secretary has been confirmed or will be shortly. And we are still waiting for confirmation for the new head of the NTIA. Christine, is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, we've met, I've spent many hours with the 50 other state broadband leaders, as well as 9 territories, looking at this issue over the past couple of weeks. And the good news on this is a nonpartisan issue. This actually impacts some of the red states even more than the blue states. If we look at Vermont, some of our rural territories averaging about 14 homes per mile. Places like Wyoming, they're trying to serve 2 homes per mile. So the consensus of the broadband leaders is fiber first, and then address with alternate technologies. But there's certainly been a unified voice on this. Now, you all know, you read the news every day. I'm not sure how much that unified voice is going to count, but at least in this particular issue, there doesn't seem to be much dissension amongst the broadband leaders.
Great. Okay, thanks.
Okay, next we have recently secured a digital equity capacity grant, also from NTIA, for $5.3 million to implement Vermont's digital equity plan. Digital equity is about Vermonters not just having access to broadband internet service, but being able to afford it, being able to have the devices they need to use it, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, or a phone, and being able to have the digital skills to use the internet effectively and safely. So that could be anything from completing a homework assignment to doing a telehealth appointment to applying for a job, and all throughout being able to avoid scams and other issues that you can come across using the internet. So this is another area where we understand there may be some concerns about programs with the term equity in it. We are shifting to using the term digital empowerment, but the grant agreement and the programs from NTIA are still called digital equity. And we, again, have a grant agreement in writing to be able to do this work. So we're very excited about proceeding over the next year with implementation of the plan and rolling out programs like a device program to get laptops, tablets, and phones into the hands of Vermonters that need them, digital navigator programs that will have community-based digital skills building programs throughout Vermont, and a sub-grant program that will allow community organizations to build capacity. So that is the program side of things, and I'm going to pass it off to JB. And I do recognize that JB is sick, so thank you for joining us, and he will talk in more detail about the budget.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Introduce myself. My name is JB Ledoux. I'm the finance manager working with the VCBB in PSD. Joining from Virgins because I'm a little under the weather, so excuse my voice and my redness.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as you can see from the papers in front of you, we have our special funds and like we talked about the USF and our federal funds, which provides the backbone for what we do here. And the only major changes from the budget last year is we have a few positions that opened up that we budgeted for in our special funds.
And the special fund is all the universal service fee?
Yes, sorry, that is the USF, the Universal Service Fee. Other than that major change, you will notice that the amount of grants changed quite a bit. We decided to get spending authority over $43 million of the BEAD grant, so we would be ready to start granting that out if it happens towards the end of fiscal year 26. Is there any specific questions I can answer from the slides in front of you?
So it looks like business as usual, more or less.
Yes, more or less it is, yes. Yes.
Does anybody?
Yeah, and I'll add to that, we
Sure.
don't have any requests out of the state budget. It's all federally funded in USF.
So we'll just keep hoping that's true.
Yes, we've had some, there's been some stressful days in all the departments recently, but as it stands, so we haven't had any problem doing any draws or any, all the programs and all the portals we use for our draws and everything has stayed up and running, and the people on the other end of them all seem very helpful and very willing and able to help us get all the money that we request and are owed. So it has actually been nice to see.
Yeah, and I want to point out that we've been very aggressive about the draws and trying to draw things as quickly as we can. And I want to call JB quick draw JB. Thank you, JB.
Well, yes.
Well, it's been great. I mean, I remember I started in this committee in 2021, the year we were remote, but we agreed, and Rep. Iacoboni was there too, so he may also remember that we really wanted to put a lot of money into broadband. That was one of our key bucket areas when we were talking about how getting this $1 billion of first tranche or whatever. I can't remember which one, but at any rate, you guys have done a great job. And I also remember that at the time, Maple Broadband is in my area, and I think some of the others also said, let's buy some of the wires and all the infrastructure pieces, even though we're not ready to build out, so we have it. And so I think there've been a lot of smart decisions made along the way, which is why you're at 95% and not at 50%.
Yeah.
So I really applaud your thinking and your strategizing to get us to where we are. And it's like last mile electrification is always the hardest part, right? So
Exactly. Yeah, we have really great partners in the communications union districts, and they've made some very strategic decisions.
yes, yeah, creating those was also a really good. Who knew at the time when we created those that it would be so important? So it's good. Thank you for all you're doing. I'm not seeing any questions from the group. And John, this one's yours.
Yes, and I've already been in contact with Christine.
Okay.
And just so you know as well, until recently, I was a member of the NEK and NEK-CV merger finance committee.
Great.
So Chris has done a great job there with that part of seeing things through and securing the money so it can be drawn down. So, but I look forward to meeting with you next
Thank
week.
you.
Lots of good people across the state doing this work. It's great. It's great. All right. Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your patience while we were running a little behind, and enjoy the rest of your day. Feel better.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks very
All
much.
right. Committee, before we go off live, we have one more organization. Because we were running late, I asked Aaron if we could move the Land Access Opportunity Board 15 minutes just to 1 o'clock. So now you get a whole hour for lunch. It'll probably be half an hour and then we'll be done for the day. So you can enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day and bring your work home because we'll be in a snowstorm. So, bring what you need. We'll talk about that at the end of the day.